it's interesting with the older generation. So you look at my dad, he started working at the coal mine, I think, when he found out he was having my brother and I, and as a job. But when he started working there, he realized that he wanted to move up. And so he went to night school to be an electrician, didn't have a certification, realized that was a better role in the existing company. And so he took his time, his personal time, still doing a great job so that he'd have an opportunity to move up. And we've lost a little bit of that, I think, this hunger, this willingness to go above and beyond. And my third year of law school, I worked more than 3 or 4 of the partners at the law firm, on top of going to law school and taking the bar.
Wow.
Because I was interested. I wanted to move ahead. And, when you start at the bottom, your job, and I think this is true of any profession, is to fundamentally solve a problem for somebody, make their life easier in some way. I don't care if you're selling or doing HVAC or a plumber or electrician, lawyer, whatever. And at a bottom role, it's exactly the same. Do your job well and make your manager's job easier.
Yeah.
You're going to get promoted. You're going to learn, right? Learn that job and perfect it before you move on to the next one. And that's, I think, what you're talking about, Ben.
Today, we have a super special guest. Paul Burghardt is a business law attorney here in town, and he's one of the best. We've mentioned him in our show, in our Reflections podcast.
Yes. And he helps us with Big Storage Ventures, Big Ben's Moving. He's our partner on one of our deals. But more than that, he's a friend. He and I connected through the gym, and he's just kind of taken me and us under his wing and helped us learn a lot of the ins and outs of business.
Yeah, I mean, so important to probably have a good attorney early on in your career. Wouldn't you agree, Ben?
Absolutely.
Instead of when it's too late. I mean, they'll cost a little bit of money up front, but worth every penny, I would say.
Yeah, Paul's a great, amazing attorney, world class, but even better, he transcends that, and he's a world class friend and mentor. Mm-hmm. So I hope you enjoyed today's show. This episode is brought to you by Big Storage Ventures. We are now inviting you to team up and partner alongside us. We bring our experience hunting storage deals and maximizing the self-storage asset to provide our partners with cash flow, tax benefits, and appreciation, all in one recession-resistant asset. Leverage our sister company, Big Ben's Moving Service, to fill your facility and give you an edge over the competition. Reach out to bigstorageventures@gmail.com or DM Big Storage Ventures on Instagram to team up.
So I have a lot of questions, and we're really grateful to have you on the show. You do a lot of really great work. For those of you that don't know, Paul is an attorney, does business law. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Well, you have your own firm and then your in-house counsel for 2
big
heavy hitters, right?
Yeah. I split my time. Probably 90% of my time is spent with those 2 clients, and then the other 10% is
on us.
And then working with Tiffany has expanded. I have an associate, Tiffany, that does a great job that has expanded my ability to service other clients.
Which is so cool that it's just natural. You're able to grow that business naturally. But so is it like the golden egg to go work for like what you're doing? Is this what people strive to get all the experience so that I can go and do what you're doing?
The practice of law is interesting that way. There was a book that was written by, it was David Tolk's brother, I forget his first name, but it's called The 6-Minute Life, and attorneys bill in 0.1s, which is 6 minutes. So they call it the 6-Minute Life, and it's the increments of 6 minutes that attorneys really don't like that. It's a great way to be efficient. If you want to track your day in 6-minute increments for the day, and you'll find out how efficient or inefficient you are.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But over time, it's taxing, because you might spend 8 hours working and only be able to bill 5.5, and it's frustrating. So I think attorneys aspire to go work in-house generally, partially because firms are pressure cookers. You work a lot there, but that billing hours you typically don't do when you're in-house. And I think a lot of attorneys think that that's really attractive.
Right.
And then the other part of that is it's sort of hard to serve a lot of people, right? So I have 20 clients, I have 20 people with number 1 priorities.
Yes.
And I have to prioritize for them, right?
Yes.
And when you work in-house, you can go and say which one of these is the number 1 priority, and you get one set of priorities.
Right.
And so that can be really tough. And what it means usually for attorneys is working nights and weekends or long hours, and you have to be sensitive to a deal. and be responsive on that. And when you're in-house, it's really easy to say like which comes first.
Yeah.
And so it helps with the work-life balance a little bit. I think that's why people like to go in, but it's also really hard to go in-house without having significant legal experience, because you're expected to be
An expert
on a variety of things, but you've got to be able to research quickly and efficiently to get an answer to a specific question. It's sort of like being stuck in a hospital bed and the channel is changing every 30 seconds and you don't have the remote. They get to decide, and they'll ask a question, and they're going to take an action on it. They're going to move on it. So you have to be quick on your feet, and it's really hard to do that right out of law school. I mean, you sort of have to go through the process and get some experience. So, but I think a lot of attorneys in law firms that generally look towards going in-house as a move up.
So how many years did you practice before you were able to make this pivot?
Probably 8 or 9 years, I think, before I went in-house. My first in-house job was with a company that had not had an in-house counsel before. And when I went in there, I took a dual role. I had a business executive role. I was chief business officer and general counsel, because the legal needs were not quite enough, but it was a business I had been helping grow inside the firm, and it felt like a good time to go do that, which was awesome.
Nice.
And we did. We grew the company. I think we quadrupled in size in 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
Which was fun.
So you had an entrepreneurial mechanism in that, basically from your first time, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was running a whole division of the company on top of the legal duties, and the law is really interesting. In fact, you were asking me the other day, Kallan, about being an attorney, and I always tell people, even if you don't want to be a lawyer, go to law school. If you want to go be an executive, and if you look at companies, it's really common. I don't know what the statistics are for an executive to be an attorney.
Yeah.
And people think that's because they work in-house as in-house counsel and then move up. I think that's less common than people that go to law school and really never practice law, because the misconception of law school is that it teaches you the law, and it does to some extent, but it really teaches you how to find out what the law is, because the law is evolving every single day.
Right.
With every court decision, with every legislative session that they pass new laws, with administrative rules that are passed. I mean, it's always evolving. And so law school teaches you the basic understanding of how it works, but you've got to go look up an answer almost every single time to be sure on something, whether it's a mechanics lien, a trucking regulation, an HR issue. And so it also teaches you how to write succinctly, how to take diverse facts,
right,
synthesize them into a very short, succinct narrative, and that between researching, clear communication, and that concept of relevancy, which is facts that are only germane to the issue you're talking about, you can tell when an executive has legal training just by the way they communicate.
Right.
And then maybe a fourth one on top of that would be learning to be comfortable with conflict, which is really tough, and not be emotional and not overreact to it and not take it personally. And I think those things are why you see so many executives have legal training. So I tell people
the soft skills you learn as a lawyer.
Yeah. The soft skills,
the technical skills
that are applicable.
Yes.
Talking to a judge who has limited time, who wants you to get to the point, is not that different than talking to a CEO who is trying to make a decision on something. Mm-hmm. And the less of their time you waste and the more relevant you are to their decision, you're going to move up in the company.
Yeah.
Right. So you think it would be worth it for anyone to go, even if you didn't want to practice?
Yeah. I mean, my personal take, and I have not researched this and looked at income, but if somebody was thinking about getting an MBA or going to law school, I would say go to law school. Yeah. It will differentiate you from the MBAs. Mm-hmm. Maybe you do my law school, I went to the University of Utah. They had a joint MBA.
The JD MBA.
Mm-hmm. And if you went to business school, I could have done it just going in the summers. I went and worked at a law firm because I wanted to be a lawyer. But the business part of it you would learn would be reading financials, things that I had to learn on the fly after the fact, and business things like that. But in terms of skill set, the legal training for me was better than the business training I had in terms of day-to-day managing the business, I think.
Which is so cool. I remember speaking to the dean at now Utah Tech, but that was something he told all this whole class. He was just giving advice, and he's like, "Don't go get a PhD. Go get a law degree. Go get your JD. Like it'll benefit you way more." And especially in that business, for him, he's like, "I wish I would have gotten went to law school,
Yeah.
which is cool. Which brings me back to kind of going to the beginning. What was going on through your mind? Like, how did you come on this path? It's not your family.
No, I didn't have a background. The story. So if you went back when I was, I don't know, 11 or 12, and they asked you to write your career, I wrote attorney. So they were
Really?
that far back, but my experience, I remember, I had a relative who had a slightly diminished capacity that got in trouble with the law on something. It was a pretty innocent mistake, but it had some pretty severe consequences. And my town was small enough that everybody sort of knew who the attorneys were, right? They were the elite people there. And
This is Price.
this is Price.
For those that don't know,
Yeah, this is Price. And
Paul Burghardt's a legend in Price.
maybe not for all good reasons. I'm not wanted as far as I know. But this attorney stood up, and I watched him defend my uncle, who was not able to speak for himself, and he could navigate the system, and thought, man, that's what I want to do. Like, the ability to defend people seemed really interesting to me. And so my path was always law school. Like, it never varied from that time forward.
Wow.
Really is, like, I think it's interesting you bring that inspiration up. I never knew that story, but I think, in our conversations with you, we talk about, that kind of old fashioned oath that lawyers used to have, like that moral obligation, almost like like the doctors take the oath too. And maybe that's lost a little bit, but I feel like with you seeing that experience with your uncle, the reason why so many big businesses want you is because you have that, you're coming from the right moral direction. And I think for us too, we enter the story, you have this background, you have this experience. And for us, we're that 10% of the time that's not with those two big firms. Like, we get a benefit with someone that is coming from the right spot. So I just thought that was cool to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and I talk about my two clients that I work for. I feel very lucky to work with them, but with both clients, the last point of a decision that we make is, should we? Which is really nice, because not all businesses are run that way. Certainly not all lawyers think that way, but that last element of, you go through the analysis of, can we? Does the law allow this? Which is always a question I get as in-house counsel or as an attorney for somebody outside counsel. But should I? Now that I know I can, just because I can do something doesn't mean I should. And the fact that those clients care about that, what's the right thing to do here? What's the right thing, not just for reputation, but for longevity and the people? It's a big point. And we talked about this a little the other day when I first came out of law school. I graduated in 2005.
Yeah.
Really started practicing in 2004 when you take a job at the law firm and you know where you're headed. That last year you work a lot at the law firm. But the attorneys that I worked under, at least, were very big on the role of the practice of law in the larger community. And it's, what's your job as a lawyer? And it was not lie, cheat, steal, take what you can get. And you see that sometimes. It was more like the Hippocratic Oath of,
Right.
how can you benefit people? And in-house, you get a luxury of doing that more because you're involved in the issues sort of at an early stage when you can influence the outcome, versus litigators deal with it only after it's broken most of the time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some planning and preventative.
We talked the other day, and you mentioned a couple of reasons why you would advise someone to go to law school. And I think you mentioned, your income, like your priorities in your life. Could you elaborate on that? Maybe explain what we were talking about there and what that advice would be.
Yeah, I mean, as a lawyer, you really do get asked a lot. What advice would you give somebody who wants to go to law school, or would you recommend going to law school? And I have my oldest kids. My son will be 18 this year. He'll be a senior this fall. And then my daughter is turning 16 in about a week and a half. And you're starting to look forward for them in life, and where are you headed? What's your trajectory? And having more substantive conversations with them. And I think the downside to practicing law is you're selling your time. Right?
You're a technician.
You're selling your time. And that time that you sell is it's a resource that you can't make more of. I mean, you only have so many hours in the day for a person. I guess you could fly fast enough at a jet to try to add a few hours. Eventually you've got to sleep, right?
Yes.
There's a famous story of a lawyer trying to build 25 hours in a day because he was traveling in the right direction on a jet, which
That's awesome.
Probably immoral, but he was pretty proud of himself for doing that. But you're fundamentally selling your time. And then you're dealing with people at critical junctures. They don't call lawyers for, what's your opinion on the election cycle or generally just a BS.
Yeah.
They're calling you because they have an issue that is critical to their business.
Yeah.
It's a decision point, go left, go right. And it's usually urgent. So it's not uncommon, at least for my generation of lawyers, to work nights and weekends. That's sort of the expectation, sometimes even if you don't want to. So there's that piece of it. But I see lawyers trending now towards more of a work-life balance a little bit. And when you're selling your time, the less of it you sell, the less you're going to make. So there's trade-offs for that for most lawyers. That I think is a trend that I'm seeing. And then my identical twin brother's a lawyer as well. And he's at a big firm. And so he sees that even more with younger generations wanting to have the conversation. What's the work-life balance? Not this always on all the time.
Yeah, I know we call you probably more than we should. I know you would never say that, but tell us how do you manage work-life balance? Like, is that ever been a struggle or?
It is a struggle. I mean, I tend towards being a workaholic, but part of it is I enjoy helping people with their problems. Maybe it's a dopamine kick, maybe it's part of my personality, but helping people do something that they couldn't have done otherwise is really fulfilling. And if you listen to other podcasts from people that are on Joe Rogan or Peter Attia or others like that, they talk about, Jordan Peterson talks about it. A man needs a purpose in life for happiness. Like, it really is so fulfilling. And so I think it makes it really easy for me to work too much. But you just have to learn to draw boundaries and not skip important things and just tell clients, like, hey, I can get to this tomorrow. That's the earliest I can do that, and be okay if they need to go somewhere else. And in fact, be magnanimous about it, support them. Like, hey, I can't get to this until next week because I'm on family time. But if you need it right now, here's a couple of attorneys that are friends that will help out and work with you. But it is a really big challenge for attorneys. And I think that's why you see some of the substance abuse problems that are pretty prevalent with lawyers. I think lawyers and dentists are the top two people for substance abuse problems or professions.
Really?
I think generally, yeah. And
I've heard that dentists are, there's studies that they're the most unhappy, some of the most unhappy.
I think that's monotony for them.
Take it from their teeth, just inject it here.
Yeah. I mean, they have access, they have monotony, sort of the same thing, Groundhog's Day, every day for them.
Yeah.
Probably not that intellectually challenging once you've done it for 10 or 15 years, not to pick on dentists. but lawyers have the opposite problem, right? Their clients are urgent. The issues are always different.
Yes.
There's a lot of minutia and fine points that, the facts.
Every day is different.
Always double checking the law or whatever it is.
What keeps lawyers up at night are missing details, deadlines, right?
Yes.
I mean, you guys have had experience with that not too long ago.
Yes.
It's important though. And when your clients are leaning on you to be that detail guy, and you've got 20 clients all with the number one priority and all different deadlines.
Yes.
It can wear on people. So I've just learned to push back and make time for things. But honestly, most lawyers I know, that means working from 11 to 4 in the morning. Sometimes, if they've got a family thing, they just shift their day around, and they don't do it a ton, but sometimes that's what it calls for.
You wake up at 3 a.m. a lot of the time for your East Coast clients, right?
I don't. I wake up pretty early though. I wake up between 5 and 7, depending on what I've had going on.
Yeah.
But some of that's a time zone difference being here.
Right.
Working with East Coast clients.
Right.
So what about a young graduate, or you just graduated from you passed the bar or whatever, and it's like, I would imagine that the culture is you gotta bust it. Like, you're gonna have to sacrifice. You're gonna have to put in all these hours before you can achieve something like that. What would you say to that? Is that true?
I would. This has been a topic I've been talking about with friends and my kids specifically recently of what to expect and how to get ahead in the world. And the perception amongst management generally for the younger generation, iGen or Gen Z, whatever you want to call them, is that they come into the business looking for the entry-level CEO position is sort of the joke. It's like, where do I start at the top?
Yeah.
And when you look at doctors, right, what do doctors do? They go to medical school for a couple of years, and then they go into a residency. And if they specialize, they go into a longer or an additional residency. And a lawyer that comes out of law school, some people hang up their shingle. That's the old term for starting your own solo firm, is hang up your shingle and open for business. Scares me to death. I don't know how they do it, because there's so much you don't know, not just the law, but how to manage, how to deal with judges, how to juggle things. the advice you get from senior partners on workload. I remember Craig Coburn was one of the partners of my firm, a great guy that still practices. He's getting pretty close to retirement. But he would say, you want to be comfortably behind. Anything less than that, you're underutilized. Anything more than that, you're going to burn out. Comfortably behind, which was really good advice. And so when lawyers come out of law school, going to work at a big firm and putting in your time is sort of like a residency for a doctor. You really need to go in and be chastised sometimes and do the grunt work, because you need
pay
to
your dues.
Pay your dues and learn how it works. When you look at businesses that are successful, the number of CEOs I work with that started with a shovel in their hand and are now running the company, I think that happens because they're driven, they're aggressive, but they also understand how the inner workings work. They can talk to a laborer with authority of, I've been in your spot.
Yes.
So for me, I think I've told you guys this, but I put myself through school mostly working in the coal mines. I had an opportunity to work there as a warehouseman, and then mostly as a diesel mechanic, which I loved. It was sort of the problem solving.
Yeah.
But
coal mine sounds crazy.
It does sound crazy. It's not as crazy as you think. I mean,
I was sticking dynamite in the wall.
No, but we drove Humvees and F-350s.
Okay.
It was definitely.
It was work though.
It was real work. I mean, you were sweating, you were greasy, you were dirty. It was real work. But the number of times in my career, especially where I work with blue collar companies, construction companies, or work in the construction industry a lot, I sit down to take a deposition or talk to somebody, a fact witness in a dispute, and they're very, very standoffish. And I start sharing what I do, and it's amazing how the conversation starts and the respect. All of a sudden, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's how the CEO.
I've been in the mines.
Yeah.
I'm from Price.
So it's not just a matter of earning your stripes to
From the
get
streets.
respect. There's real value in that ability to understand and not look down on people when you're doing that. So I think that's one of the steps that, in my view, the younger generation is trying to skip out on, is that in the trenches, start at the bottom. They want to fast forward to the great life. And you're probably not ready for it if you could find an opening, but you're missing out on a huge component of the process.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes me think of someone had a big influence in my life. He's a surgeon in town, but like he's doing extremely well and he has an amazing life, but he put in 13 years, literally, where they sacrificed. And I always thought, like, what if I put in 13 years like him in anything? Like, and you were able to do that, like grunt, and I can't do blood, so I'm not going to, go to medical school.
Same, yeah.
I would literally pass out.
Oh yeah, you're like that too.
Yeah, that's me.
We could tell stories that we probably shouldn't about me passing out because of that. But I think that's really, really powerful. And I think having that vision, that end in mind, thinking, no, I'm going to go do this to gain this experience is really cool. I think it's really hard to know what you want to do. And this is what I think would be a big challenge to navigate is when you're a doctor, they have it planned out. Like, okay, you're going to go do this. And it's like this map to get you. And then at the end of the tunnel, but in other professions, it's not so clear how are my pivots in my life and the experiences I'm going to get me where I want to be. And sometimes I feel like that's a big challenge today, but
no, I think that's right. It's not as linear. It's not as planned out for those people, but I don't care what you want to do. If you want to go work in a grocery store and run one someday, or if you want to go do HVAC, right, and own your own company someday, you really have to master a skill before you move on to the next one, sort of like a toddler. Or maybe the better example is like an endurance athlete, right? Endurance athletes talk about having a solid training foundation. And the beginning of that is working at very low intensity for long periods of time in zone 1 or 2. And the problem is if you skip that step and you just start working in 4 and 5, it will topple. Your training will topple. You will not hit your peak efficiency and you'll start getting injured and you will not be able to sustain it. And so when you look at training programs for elite athletes, I did a lot of mountain bike racing for years and learned a lot about the training component. That foundation is the key focus for a lot of trainers that people want to skip. And I think it's the same in a profession or a business, whatever career it is, you've got to have the foundation to be a resource and useful at a higher level. No matter how smart you are, there is no substitute for experience. I've been there, I've done this, I've seen this. even this week, my client's building a building out by your storage facility. And,
Right.
And I saw the building at the early stages when they were doing the tilt-up panels, and I saw it. It's almost done. I saw it the other day, and it looks beautiful. And I've met the person in charge of that business for a few times, and he's in his 60s. He's towards the end of his career, and he's the conductor for the orchestra.
Oh.
And my thought was, he has probably put together every piece on that building so that he knows how to manage it. He's had to do every job so that he knows how to conduct this orchestra and build that building. And you think of the individual decisions, the individual pieces that it takes to put together a facility like that, and it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
There's no way you graduate. You go to school for 50 years until you get your hands dirty. You're not going to be able to do a good job at that. I couldn't go do that.
No, there's no way.
So you're saying, is this guy the general contractor that's the conductor for the symphony?
He's the manager for the general contractor.
Okay.
Yeah,
So he's like
the lead guy.
He's a
on the site.
superintendent type guy.
He's the superintendent for the general contractor on the site. He is the guy making the decisions and directing traffic.
Yeah.
What a cool metaphor. Like the same guy that's conducting the symphony and putting all the pieces together is also the same guy creating the construction symphony.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah,
I can't believe that there are people that can build buildings like that. Every time I look at them, I'm like, where are these people coming from? I think that every time.
Well, and the joke is, right, if the world went post-apocalyptic, right, we're living in a time where most of the population is gone, and they ask you to recreate a cell phone. It's like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I have no concept, right? Something I use every day. It's with me all of the time. I wouldn't even know, like, I know the shape.
Yeah.
I know that the screen turns on. Beyond that, I don't know much, right? Like even simple things like generating electricity. Most people would have no idea how to recreate that.
Yes.
And so you start to look at this specialized industry we're in and the needs for that, and it applies to attorneys, like it applies to doctors, engineers. You can't fast forward. You don't want an engineer that skipped math classes.
Yeah.
His building's going to fall down, right?
He used AI to pass his stuff.
Yeah, right.
ChatGPT. How do I do engineering on this building?
Yeah, I mean, you really don't want
That's
them making big mistakes because they skipped a step.
Yes. So we were talking a little bit about that linear path, and we already mentioned where you're at. Did you always know? Because I'm sure there's a ton of different directions you can go as an attorney, but did you know that you wanted to go into business, or what was that like? That path
Started with defense, right? You like the guy defending your uncle.
Yeah, I actually went to law school thinking I was going to be a criminal attorney.
Right.
Prosecution.
Interesting.
Not defense, maybe defense, but two realities hit in. One is they're paid very poorly. Both judges and anybody that works in the public sector, whether it's a prosecutor or a judge, are generally paid a small fraction of what good attorneys at law firms are paid. So it's a route that's not attractive for that reason. But as I got into law school and started learning more about contracts and some of those things, and the UCC Uniform Commercial Code that we deal with, and secured transactions, which is how loans are secured or advances of money are secured, those resonated with me. And my undergrad was in business, so I think it was pretty natural for me to pivot to that. But it was not what I went to law school thinking I was going to do. And the advice I would give to somebody, though, that is trying to decide is don't be arbitrary in deciding, and don't be unwilling. Don't be so fixated on a decision that if you're good at something and it's an aptitude for it and you find it interesting, don't be afraid to pivot. But lawyers do so many different things. I don't know if there's a more diverse field. I mean, you could argue engineers might work on different types of things, but they're all doing basic engineering and running calculations on stress and things like that.
Yeah.
Lawyers, incredibly diverse. So there's lawyers that do,
especially if you're in-house.
In-house have to be sort of a jack of all trade, master of none, right? That's only part of that saying. I don't know if you guys ever heard the whole saying, the jack of all trades, master of none.
Right.
There's another part of it about better than master of none or something like that. Or there's a further part of it where it's not as negative as it says. But if you take lawyers, you could be a tax lawyer where you're dealing only with tax law.
Right. And big firms have one guy for each thing, right?
That is the nicest part about working at a firm is they get to specialize. They get to learn one area perfectly. Yeah. That's all they do. And they really are fairly incompetent outside of that. It's interesting as in-house attorney, I have to know a lot of things, probably not as in-depth. Attorneys at law firms will specialize in water rights. And it may even be a subset of water rights.
Or cell phone towers, or just one random thing.
solar farms.
Yeah.
They're specialized attorneys that deal with that, right? Anything you see that is an industry typically has an attorney. Trucking, right, is another example. HR attorneys, estate planning attorneys. I mean,
Yes.
there really are specialties that family law attorneys,
Right.
criminal attorneys, the system is so different that you're almost practicing in a different profession, a criminal attorney to a civil attorney.
Right.
Wow.
And so it's diverse. And that's the other reason I tell people go to law school if you're not entirely sure. If you decide to go into a business and not be a lawyer, it's going to benefit you, but you're also opening the door to, I don't know, probably 1,000 different professions, I think, which is nice. I mean, you're not picking one linear path that as you learn about things, it may change. Your desire may change.
Well, and you're going to make pivots, right? So like what I'm taking away, and you said, you know, you're trying to teach your teenage kids how to get ahead in life. It's pay your dues, right? Like I think the pacing is a really key thing that you talk about, because we've been, you know, the generation in front of us was stuck in one role for so long and they weren't willing to pivot or move off of it. I feel like, this is just my opinion, our generation is starting to catch on to, okay, we need to pivot, make moves, we need to grow. And I think the generation behind us is hearing our generation say that and thinking that means skip steps, right? So it's almost like ahead of us, the people were too focused on put your head down, and behind us, the people are too focused on pivot fast. You know, there's got to be that happy medium.
Yeah, it's interesting with the older generation. So you look at my dad, he started working at the coal mine, I think, when he found out he was having my brother and I, and as a job. But when he started working there, he realized that he wanted to move up. And so he went to night school to be an electrician, didn't have a certification, realized that was a better role in the existing company. And so he took his time, his personal time, still doing a great job so that he'd have an opportunity to move up. And we've lost a little bit of that, I think, this hunger, this willingness to go above and beyond. And my third year of law school, I worked more than 3 or 4 of the partners at the law firm, on top of going to law school and taking the bar.
Wow.
Because I was interested. I wanted to move ahead. And, you know, when you start at the bottom, your job, and I think this is true of any profession, is to fundamentally solve a problem for somebody, make their life easier in some way. I don't care if you're selling or doing HVAC or a plumber or electrician, lawyer, whatever. And at a bottom role, it's exactly the same. Do your job well and make your manager's job easier.
Yeah.
You're going to get promoted. You're going to learn, right? Learn that job and perfect it before you move on to the next one. And that's, I think, what you're talking about, Ben.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing advice. And I'm glad you brought up your dad, because you, your brother, your other brother are all pretty amazing human beings. What is some advice or lessons you learned from your dad?
You say that without meeting my 2 brothers. Academically. No.
We know they're all brainiacs.
Yes, they're all very smart
and
affluent individuals, I guess, in society. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's drive and hunger, right? My dad, for better, for worse, when we were growing up, would say to us that he went hungry as a kid because people were too lazy to work. And there was probably no larger cardinal sin in my family than laziness. I get away with almost anything besides laziness. That was a cardinal sin, but it came from his scarcity, right? He didn't have things because he watched adults sit down and refused to do that. And so he was driven, made the most as he could, and said, hey, I worked to put you ahead in life to where you get to go to college. I was the first college graduate on either side of my family.
Wow. Really?
Just any college degree, and then first one to graduate from a graduate degree. And so it was sort of new in our families to go do that. But that was, my dad instilled that in us as a hunger, and which is a big deal. You can't manufacture that. If the thing I worry about most with my kids is that I've given them too good a life and have not created that fire out of circumstance. Maybe they'll find it for themselves, but not out of strife.
Right.
I think about that, the risks with kids, because every generation you always want to provide what you never had, but then there's consequences to that. So on the topic of mentors, were there anybody that comes to your mind along your journey, along your path, that, really had a big influence in your life?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people. There's no way I've been as successful as I have been without a lot of people redirecting you. And I think this is one of the I feel like I'm picking on the younger generation, but I think it's because I have
it.
kids that are part of that generation that are leaving the home soon. And so my focus is there right now. That's where my mind has been. But these mentors aren't just people that tell you want to hear. Often they're the people that are really hard on you and tell you truths, because really caring about somebody is being honest with them. It's not polishing them up and telling them things that they want to hear. And some of those things are really hard. I have been knocked off of my pedestal. I have been knocked down a notch a number of times. And I have a lot of memories of being chastised and learning from that, though. And when you're chastised by somebody in a position of power or authority over you, a manager, something like that, or a boss of a company, you can pout and say you're being unfair and go hide in your hole and feel sorry for yourself, or you can show them and do a better job and try to listen. Even if you think they're wrong, chances are they're right about part of it. And how could you improve yourself? And so, even when you talk about a mentor, it's, what is a mentor? I mean, there's kind of two kinds. There's the motivating mentor who may be hard on you, but is pushing you to be your better self. Or there's a mentor, somebody that you look up to and want to aspire. How did you get there? Right?
Yeah.
Like, how are you doing that? And I think I've had both in my life.
I've heard you preface a lot of statements with, I had a mentor, or I used to work for this guy who told me this. So I can tell you kind of been a sponge of all these great people around you the whole time, and it's kind of cool transitioning how you pay it forward. Like, to me, you're a mentor, right? Like, we met at CrossFit and you kind of put your arm around me and said, hey, I can help you with some stuff. Like, and you've provided us so much value. I know, you're not a huggy guy, but we've been through just in like the 6 months, we've been working together. Like, we've been through some wars already. Like, it's been awesome. And it's been really good for us. Kallan's come in and we just get to like kind of learn at your feet. But to me, you're someone like, yes, you're our lawyer, but you're also our business partner, our friend. And to me, you kind of transcend, like, even though a big part of what we discuss is the law, like, you transcend that for me. And so I don't feel like that's normal, that a lawyer, that's pretty much what they are to someone. But I think you've done a lot of stuff with self-development, I would say. And like, you probably put a lot of work on yourself just outside of sharpening your skills in this one area. So maybe talk to me about things that you do that are more universal that you do to develop yourself than just the law.
It's a big question.
That was a run-on sentence. But
the first thing that comes to mind to me is dealing with stressful situations, doing something new or doing something that is critical, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that rides on it, and it's exciting to be at the point of the spear. You're at the front of an organization dealing with a critical issue.
Yeah.
It's also really nerve-wracking because if you screw it up, you let a lot of people down. And for me, in those spots, I find my mind always wandering towards somebody that I have seen do it well.
Interesting.
And channeling that perspective and knowing that they did it, of adopting that persona a little bit, right? Because you don't know sometimes. And sometimes, in fact, I heard, I read it one time, advice is never let the moment be bigger than you. It's from a really cool book, Matthew McConaughey, Greenlight.
Interesting.
Have you ever read that book?
I haven't.
Highly, highly recommend it. His perspective is awesome, but he talks about never letting the moment be bigger than you, because if you let it, it will.
Okay.
And so one of the mentors I had is an attorney named Matthew Barnack, a great human being on top of just a lawyer, but a really well-respected litigator.
Yeah.
I saw judges a number of times say something to the effect of, your word is good enough for me, because he was so well-respected and known.
Wow.
And you build
the
that
judge said
reputation.
that.
Yeah.
Like in a formal setting?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Yeah. As a chastisement to the other party, actually, a couple of times, because he had been so consistent in being forthright and honest on top of being a good lawyer that he had built that reputation. But I saw him deal with stressful situations, and sometimes I would think, like, what would Matt do in this spot? And that was kind of the guiding principle of how to handle it.
So summarize what kind of mindset you need to not let the moment be bigger than you.
Man, it is hard sometimes, right? I was at a shareholder meeting for my client is owned by Markel, which is a publicly traded company. It's a giant company, and we were in Richmond, Virginia last week for the shareholder meeting, and the CEO, Tom Gaynor, great guy, really, really smart, was there speaking in front of this. There was thousands of people, maybe 8,000 people there, and he's speaking in front of them. And I thought, man, what would I always tend to transpose myself into that spot? What would it be like? for me. And he would look so comfortable up there, but I'm sure that he wasn't.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's always remembering, and I give this advice to my kids, everybody is nervous in a spot like that. They've just learned how to put it in its place and to make peace with it. You know, this is the theory. Have you guys heard of the monster in the basement?
Tell us.
So this is pretty well, it's in a lot of different books talking about self-development and things. And it's, everybody has a monster in the basement, whether it's an addiction of some sort or it's a procrastination habit, it's a monster in the basement. And the worst thing you can do is ignore the monster. If you ignore and pretend like it's not there, eventually it's going to get big enough that it'll eat the whole house.
Wow.
You're better to make friends with your monster and feed it and talk to it and acknowledge it and make peace with it, honestly, because you think about not letting the moment be bigger than you. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's a fear of failure, something that's there. And you really have to just say, okay, I'm going to be nervous. That's normal. Yeah. It's not going to stop me from doing this, versus don't be nervous, don't be nervous, don't be nervous. That might be the entirely wrong advice for handling that situation, so that when the nervousness shows up, you panic.
Yeah. Confrontation. You said it right out the gate. That's one of the things that you pick up as a lawyer, is how to confront things. And if you can do it in a court setting, then you can apply it to your personal life. And when things come up, you don't back down. You handle it you address it, right?
Right.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. So I think that's advice. And that Matthew McConaughey book, I mean, it really is it's his story of his life, which is really interesting. And he's very raw in that. And he's got some good advice outside of that. But he talks about people that influenced him in his life quite a bit there too, though. And I think you can have 50 people that influence you, and you take one thing from each of them that's a tool in your toolkit that you want to take on.
Yeah. Kallan asked you the question, like, who's your mentors? And I thought, like, I have a mentor for everything. I have like a business mentor, a spiritual mentor, exercise mentor, so
probably a marriage mentor, somebody in a marriage, a husband that you want to be like, or a father, right? I mean, it's every aspect of your life. You should have somebody. The podcasts have been a really interesting forum, though, for dispersing information. There's a few I listen to pretty religiously. And
what's a couple of your favorites?
I like Peter Attia with The Drive. It's pretty dense. He might be the smartest person I've ever listened to talk. He brings these experts in, and he talks so knowledgeably about these minutiae that I think he catches the experts off guard sometimes. But he's a really personal guy. And just a little aside for him, that's pretty interesting. Yeah. I have looked up to him for years as somebody that he's a great athlete. He's focused on his family. He deals with longevity science, which is increase in lifespan or health span. It's not just how long you live, but how long you're healthy.
Yes.
And but he was talking to Joe Rogan on his podcast in the last month, and he went to inpatient treatment 2 times in the last 5 years because he was so hard on himself internally. Here's this person that I put on a pedestal that I want to be. Peter T is awesome.
Wow.
And, he's talking candidly about his own struggles with having a voice inside his head that was so hard on him. He needed to learn to back off of himself. And so podcasts, you get to hear these raw moments from people. I like Joe Rogan, depending on who his guest is. He's good at facilitating a conversation. I don't know if I like Joe Rogan himself or the guests he brings on, but that's a really interesting one.
Yeah. Well, sidebar, we learned the whole ice bath thing from Paul, and this just goes into like personal stuff. This helps with your health and helps with your life balance, your mentality. I always had to do ice baths for college sports every day, but Paul taught me the sauna, ice bath, sauna, ice bath, sauna. And me and Kallan were like giggling, like we got high. We didn't know it was hitting us. So it's funny that you guys kind of picked that up from a podcast and got me into that too. I had to just.
It was from the endorphin rushes you had. And,
right.
It's interesting you bring that up though. So my routine with that is every morning I get in a cold plunge for 3 or 4 minutes, and it's not easy some days, but it's I've been doing it about 3 months now. And you've heard the advice of make your bed in the morning, right?
Right.
They teach in the military and I've never done that. I'm terrible at making my bed.
I'm glad to hear that because I don't either. And I don't think it ties to success.
Ice bath, there are days I get up, it is the last thing I want to do, but I know I'm going to feel good after, and I know it's going to benefit. And just the discipline of starting up with a win or doing something that is hard that you don't want to, it colors the whole rest of your day.
Yeah.
I don't care what you have going on, how stressed, how bad you feel, doing something like that. And then at night, I use the cold and the sauna routine for stress and just overall sort of decompressing for the day. And little self-care, and
Yeah.
the habit has been hugely beneficial in my life.
It's so powerful. I remember, I think it was just this week, I was taking a nice warm shower in the morning, and I'm like, I cannot believe anyone is cold plunging first thing in the morning right now. I cannot believe it. I just
To all you religious bed makers, try a cold bath and then reach out to us.
Well, not to get off on that tangent, but the mornings are typically the hardest time to sit and work, especially where I work from home a lot. You have to be self-motivated. You got to get up and start getting into some really technical, heavy thinking, maybe a little groggy. You didn't sleep well the night before. It's amazing how different my morning is if I have the discipline to go do a cold plunge. I think it would be the same if you went for a run or made yourself do something out of your comfort zone that's hard.
Yeah.
It makes it feel downhill. I mean, the whole morning of dealing with hard things is now downhill instead of drudging in the mud uphill.
Yeah.
So I think being purposeful is the whole point of that, right? Being purposeful of that can be really helpful.
Yeah, because I felt similar things when I get up and work out in the morning. So when I'm at the gym at 6 a.m. and then I show up to work, like I'm gonna be killing it that day. But if I sleep in, I'll just be groggy, and it's just not as productive. But the principles are similar. But if I could do both,
yeah, I mean, if you could do both, I think that'd be.
I'd be a champion.
When you look at successful people I know, though, people that are at the highest level of a business, especially the newer generation, I'm going to say people that are 50 and under, they almost always have a significant health component to their routine. They're exercisers, they do some sort of a sport, they do something. And I think that does a few things. I think doing something hard like that makes everything else feel downhill. I think the discipline of it benefits them in their daily routine, but I also think it's a medicine. I think it helps with the stress reduction in terms of quality of life.
Yeah.
And I think it makes those really hard roles sustainable. In fact, there was an article, I saw it on Apple News, I don't remember, that exercising during the day is the new CEO flex, right? That's their thing, because they can do that during the day, but they prioritize it enough that they take time out of their day, recognizing it makes them more efficient to do that. So
that's awesome.
I think you're seeing some of those trends come in that are versus having a whiskey behind your desk and take the edge off. They're learning to do it in a more healthy way.
Yeah, it makes me think of Zuck was on Joe Rogan, and he's got into MMA to help clear his mind. But like,
oh gosh,
it's so funny. Yeah, we won't have to get into that, but
no, I think that's big. I think it's important that you point out like some of these patterns you have observed with these high level people. You have the unique experience of rubbing shoulders with, I don't know, for sure, tens of millions, but probably some billionaires too.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. Besides that, they all have a health component. What are some other patterns you recognize when you're getting to connect with these people?
In my experience, which admittedly is somewhat limited, but I know a lot of you interact with, when you're in a C-level position at a company, you tend to interact with other C-level executives from different organizations, that the problems sort of roll up to that level. Most of the businesses I have seen that are really successful and growing and evolving in good ways have sort of this duality at the top. They've got a detail person and they've got an idea person. Businesses with only a detail person tend to be static and don't grow because they're afraid of risk, right? They're risk averse. People that are dreamers tend to be like shooting stars, where they do really well and then they fall apart. And I could name 10 businesses right now that are very successful where they have that dynamic, where there is, even if it's a strong CFO role for a CEO, sometimes it's a president and a CEO, or an owner and a CEO, but it's at the highest level. You have somebody who is always insisting on getting the details right. So you're not getting over your skis, you're not getting into a spot where you're surprised by things. But then you've got the idea guy who has the vision and is pushing the detail guy a little bit out of their comfort zone. But it really does create this balance.
Yeah.
And going back a little bit towards being a lawyer in-house is different from a business, and I am critical of lawyers in firms a lot of the time. My job is not to make a decision for the client. It's to inform the client of what the risks are and then let them make a business decision. And I always categorize in legal things and business decisions, right? Some things are clearly illegal and you don't do it.
Right.
Sometimes there's a risk, and to get a deal, you have to absorb that risk. And my job is, once they make that, I always say the same thing: I'm team you. There's no looking back. There's no sour grapes. Like, I'm giving you the choices. You make one, I'm on your page. And I think that dynamic of an idea dreamer and a detail guy, maybe it's the accountant at the top of a business, they learn to sort of live in that space.
Yeah. It's almost like more than seeing like successful people, you've almost seen successful teams and how they operate.
I think it's rare to have a successful person in this day and age. I think the world is too complex. There's so many things that are going on. I mean, you look at what the average business has to deal with that maybe nobody in the organization understands, from insurance, taxes, you've got accounting principles, you've got management, you've got HR. I mean, these are really diverse problems, any one of which could have a huge detrimental impact on the business. You really have to have a team to run a business of any size. And that's the dynamic I have seen that works really, really well for growing successful businesses.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
See war rooms.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I love talking about like the things you've done to basically balance your life and get some of those things. A question that came to my mind was, with being an attorney and the stress that it can have and the reputation as well. Have you ever had a moment where you wanted to quit? And
yeah, no, I mean, that burnout is real. Burnout is so tough. It's interesting when you're a lawyer. Of course, you know a lot of other lawyers. You're friends with lawyers. My twin brother is a lawyer, and the practice tends to ebb and flow. And one of the pieces of advice I got from a mentor that was really good that I still struggle from, it was Matt Barnick that gave me that. He said, when he has a little bit of a lull, he's learned to just go on vacation and enjoy it because it's not going to last, versus being worried about not being busy enough, because good lawyers are always busy, is what he said.
Yeah.
And I have found that to be true. And when I don't do that and I end up stressing through those, then you end up with no break. But I've had times where we've had big deals happening where it's 7 days a week, pretty much, or going to trial, where every minute you can possibly work and be productive, you are working. And it's not sustainable. I mean, you really start taking out a pillar. For me, exercise is a big one. You remove just that one component and you start to tumble a little bit, right? You take sleep away, second one. You start to tumble. Next thing you know, you're starting to drink 4 energy drinks a day to try to compensate. And it's this spiral to where you really have to pause or you're going to burn out. And I've had a couple of times in my career where I did not want to do this or anything anymore. I mean, you get so burned out and you sort of have to backtrack and let yourself backtrack. And maybe a piece of advice that goes with this, and I think where people get in trouble, is they get married to their income, where they're living paycheck to paycheck, and they create no buffer to have a bad month or to slow down for a second, and they've got to have their nose on the grindstone to survive. Man, it's a deadly combination that you're just going to burn out and end up with a substance abuse problem or run people in your life off. So for me, it has been taking 5-10 steps back, getting your foundation back in place, and then sort of re-engaging with that.
That's really powerful. I think like the relationship with money. I mean, you have to be able to say, well, first you have to make those decisions with your budget, living beneath your means, so that you can take that. It makes me think of one of my supervisors from my last job. He always advised everyone to have some FU money, and that's what he called it. But it was basically like, if you have a run-in with someone or like your boss or something happens, like you need to be able to have, this FU money saying, all right, well, I can survive for 2-3 months or whatever it is, so I can, regroup and get on to the next thing.
Yeah, I remember at the law firm I was at, it was called, it's still there, but it's a different form now. It was Richards, Brandt, Miller, Nelson, and the office manager was Susan was her name, Susan Patterson. And she was a very strong woman. I had a lot of respect for Susan. She could have the tough conversations and nobody was going to disagree with her. I mean, she was just really powerful and confident. But my practice, when I started practicing, every time I would get a raise or a cost of living increase for the year, I would put all of that off into an account that I never banked at. I didn't have any access to because I had already learned to live off the money I was making. And she told me one time, because my wife wasn't on the account, that it's not good to hide money from your wife, which I always laughed at. I said, that's not the purpose. But the point was, it was out of sight, out of mind.
But it kind of is. Don't let your wife have it.
It was hiding from me too, really, right? It was
Yes.
so inconvenient. There was no branch in the state where I was at. Like, it went to deposit. It was a very hard, especially
That's
before
so cool.
online banking became a big thing. But it was money that it was a degree of difficulty. It was a backflip instead of a somersault to get to it.
Yes.
And it created an automatic cushion, and you just learn to live off what you make. And I don't care if you make $50,000 a year or 500,000, you will expand your lifestyle to meet whatever is in your account. It's human nature.
Yeah, I think that is so important. I think everyone listening is just really great advice. We had Dr. Tom Burns on. He wrote the book, Why Doctors Don't Get Rich. He was the first person in history to buy Rich Dad, Poor Dad from Robert Kiyosaki from a car wash. Anyways, that was his same thing. His same thing was, you've got to learn how to live beneath your means. We met with someone who's made millions of dollars and it's gone. And I was having this conversation with my wife. I'm like, we could be making $500,000 a year or $1 million a year, and we could have the same problems we have right now because we don't know how to live beneath our means. And if we don't learn that and learn how to put some money away and have that growing, then it doesn't matter how much money we make, we're going to have problems.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, you mentioned, in fact, I was going to talk about that today, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book.
Oh, yeah.
3 books that I would recommend for anybody that's starting out in their careers or college would be Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And maybe read it annually until you kind of get your feet under you. Actually, investment life strategy, right? Your path. The Richest Man in Babylon is another great one. Very sort of a similar concept than As a Man Thinketh. I don't know if you guys have read that, but it's As a Man Thinketh is a book about treating your thoughts, your mind like a garden and your thoughts, and that you have control over what comes into your head and your thought patterns. And it's a book that was written before the Great Depression, either late 1800s, early 1900s, and it still endures because it's written in a language pattern that we don't write in today. It's not difficult to read, but it sounds like it's a little old-timey.
Yeah.
But it's such good advice for being mindful and purposeful of your own thoughts. And man, if you I don't know if a week goes by that I don't think about either Rich Dad, Poor Dad or The Richest Man in Babylon, those books in terms of making choices, and for those of you that haven't read those or may not read them, The Richest Man in Babylon talks about your money being like, it equates them to workers or slaves in the book, right? But people that are working for you, and you can take that dollar and you can give it away for immediate gratification, or you can take it and you can have people that are out there working for you. And every dollar you save is now a person out there working for you.
That's big.
In the field. And when you build a big enough sum of that, then you have people that are working. So it goes into that. They're just really good mindsets to have as you're starting in your career. And
think of a dollar as someone on your payroll, right? Every dollar is something that can work for you, or you can just let them go.
Yeah. And when I look at my life, I push education. I'm huge on education, whatever education it is, whether it's a technical education or a PhD, if that's your chosen path, like my little brother. But it's something you can never have taken away from you. It doesn't go away into bankruptcy. It is an asset. It is an improvement that sticks with you for your life, absent something catastrophic of losing your license to practice medicine or law. It really is, though. It is an enduring thing that you have bettered yourself, similar to a dollar you're talking about. Once you put a dollar and leave it out there working, the time value of money is science. I mean, it really will work in your benefit in the long run.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think it's really cool. Just those things that keep coming back into your mind as you go, just that those basic principles stick with you,
Yeah, I love you sharing those 3 books too. I think that's, they're even just being on this podcast, something that's really helped influence my life are the books that people have, introduced to me and learning. And so it's really cool to see that too. So
like I need to have a hat on backwards here and turn it around for you guys. I'm a little out of costume here with the way you guys are doing that.
Well, I could put my hat forward for advertisement.
No, you're good.
Ben's wearing a squatty potty hat. That's why I put it.
No, it's been. I was gonna comment just that I've noticed that too. Not that I mean, you've had some time now. You have a nice house and stuff like that, but you don't have the same, like, I guess a lot of lawyers have a flashy reputation. Like they have to pull up in the nicest car to their appointments, and that's a controversial debate. But I've noticed, like, obviously you treat your income as a lawyer as like your cash cow. Like that's your business, and you have put it away and you've invested in other businesses and real estate all along the way. And it's cool. Like I already knew that, but it's cool to hear the backstory of your mentality the whole time was you had a separate bank account. You had this planned. It wasn't something that just, oh, I have this extra money, I'll invest it in real estate. It's like, no, you actually reverse engineered it and had that bank account set up the whole time.
Yeah, it's important. And I have noticed this trend. And as a lawyer, you generally work with pretty successful people that can afford to pay you.
Right.
For better or for worse, probably for worse in the overall access to justice, right?
Right.
But your clients are successful. And I would say the people that look the richest to you are not. People that tend to show their money are not people that have actual money. Most of the people I know that have true generational wealth, money that they'll never need to worry about money in their life. You might think they were homeless. You might think that they were on the poverty line, and it almost goes too far. The pendulum swings so far that they won't spend on anything because they're thinking that they're giving away their dollars, right? They could be earning a return. They get so focused on the return versus on the other side. And I'm sure this is what that doctor talked to you about with his book, Why There Are No Wealthy Doctors, is that they spend for luxury items. And I'm probably a little, in fact, I know I'm a little spendy on cars. It's one of the things I like. I don't have super nice cars, but I like a nice newer car. The wealthiest friends or clients that I have don't drive nice cars. It's sort of crazy. You have to get to know them and involved in their life before you see their wealth.
Which is super cool. I love that. I love the millionaire next door concept. And it makes you think. We met with the builder, and he was talking about the CEO. He's good friends with the CEO of Clyde Companies, the Wilford Clyde Companies. And he was just like, he's just the most amazing guy. You wouldn't know it. He drives like an old truck, and it's cool to see. And I really like that. So to wrap up, I want to come back to what you mentioned before, which is your kids, thinking of that generation, your kids. And maybe with them in mind, what advice would you give to them and to our listeners as like our final takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting journey for me. I had some really embarrassing steps along the way. I mean, I didn't grow up in a college atmosphere. I didn't do very well in high school. I didn't even know to do. I don't think I ever took a book home in high school at all. Sort of.
Wow. You
could argue I was bored. I was probably just didn't even know how to study and had to learn how to do that. But there were a lot of circumstances over the years where I was embarrassed, frankly. I was with people who were successful. I would mispronounce a word when I was in law school with people. I remember graduating from law school. The main speaker was one of the kids I went to school with, dad, and he was a cabinet member for the White House and for the president, and my dad, this coal miner, almost didn't come to my graduation because he was worried about it. And it's so easy to get overwhelmed on those things. And what I always tell my kids and over again is that it takes so much consistency to put together a good life. Consistent, everyday decisions. It's not that you're not going to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. The trick is to learn from them and not keep repeating them. But you can screw a life up so fast with bad decisions, whether it's financially, whether it's reputation-wise, whether it's profession or a substance abuse. You can really destroy it in a heartbeat. And I see it, unfortunately. We deal with people that are getting fired from companies that are otherwise successful and make really poor choices where you have no choice. But the lives that you tend to look up to, even if it's an actor, Tom Hanks, say, I really like Tom Hanks as a person. When you read their stories, and this is that Matthew McConaughey book,
yes,
they started at the bottom and had to work their way up. When you go to Nashville, you hear that Faith Hill was a receptionist at one of the studios there. It's how she got her start. Here she is, this huge, famous person that I really like.
Right.
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford. I think if you go look at Denzel Washington has those stories, right? A lot of these really successful people in life started out nowhere with nothing, and they just walked through every single door. But man, you think about 20 or 30 years of consistency to get where they want to go. And I think that's back where this younger generation wants to fast forward. And I'm not so sure you might get lucky and be a YouTube star or a TikTok star and fast forward. But the vast majority of America, you're going to get ahead by consistency every day.
I love it.
Yeah, that's just basically saying no quit, keep showing up and stringing together, these years, these decades is bigger than just, one push. You got to do it every day. It's part of who you are. It's not just a one-time act. So
yeah,
thanks,
and it's not just up. You're going to go down. You're going to get knocked down and have to regroup a few times. In fact, almost every successful business owner I know has had a failed business or two. They have had a hard time making payroll at times in their career, and they've learned from it and restarted. They haven't given up. That perseverance. In fact, I remember he's a lawyer in Logan, was my mission president when I was in Russia on a mission. And he said that perseverance will serve you better than all of the glamour or brilliance. And it's true.
Wow.
I have it written everywhere, that phrase. So
I love it, man. I love it. And it goes with a piece of advice you kind of gave me one time. Like a lot of times our calls are, hey, this happened. Like, let's plan around this, or we got this deal. Let's talk about this. But one time you just paused me and you said basically like, hey, I want you to like pause and like just realize all these experiences are just learning. And that stuck with me, man. So thank you. Thanks for helping us. I mean, obviously we're grateful for all the work you do for Big Ben's Moving and Big Store Adventures. And we're glad you're a partner on our deals, but even more, we're glad we have a chance to be your friend and pick your brain and do the ice bath and go to the gym and just get to know you and learn from you. And thanks for being a mentor to us, just like you had those mentors for yourself.
yeah, it's great working with you guys, and thanks for inviting me.
Well, awesome.
That's a great show. Thanks, guys.